Good evening, everyone. As you can see, I'm struggling with trying to get this specific window to come up, so bear with me for a second. And I should have it up here pretty soon, hopefully. Okay, so now we have the window up, so hopefully we're on the right page, or right track. Let's see if this works.
Yeah, you should definitely submit that because that's an amazing photo. Did you take that yourself?
Yeah, out of the cupola window aboard the space station.
Artemis stands
The
ready.
resolution's great.
The cameras
Ready to
out
turn
there are
dreams into
incredible.
reality.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Ready
So
to
I
return
haven't
humanity
taken
to the
a photo
moon
now,
and
so I
take
have
us
nothing to
further than ever
submit.
before.
So how do you feel about creating one?
The culmination of
Let's do it.
inspiration
All right,
and
well, take
innovation,
that.
of Herculean
If you don't mind
efforts and
lifting it up,
steadfast
and we're just
collaboration,
gonna snap a
Artemis
photo
1
here. Ooh,
is
lighting.
ready for departure.
Perfect.
And the
So I
Artemis
just created
generation
a
is
moon
about to
snap. I
leave
love
its
I'm gonna
mark.
Share it. And again, this is just to encourage people to really get involved in this mission.
What will be a journey of more than
we will
500,000 miles to the moon
collect share
and
those
back.
photos. So again, if you
Starts
haven't
right
mapped the
here
moon snap,
at Launch Complex 39 Bravo.
Okay, Artemis 1
Although
comes
this first
amid
flight
a
will
very
not carry a
busy
crew,
year and
it will
exciting
test
year
every
at NASA.
system in the deep
Some of
depths of
highlights
space
include
to prepare the way for
commercial
future crewed
launches
missions.
with SpaceX, Crew 4 in April, and then
When the
Crew
final
5
go is
last
given
month.
and the teams
In
at Kennedy
May,
Space
NASA
Center
is going
release this
to
rocket,
OS2,
Artemis will
second
roar to life
flight
and we will
test
witness the
Starliner
beginning of a
capsule.
tightly
The goal
choreographed
is to
mission.
certify the capsule for regular flight to the International Space Station after a crewed flight test next year. In July, we released the first images captured by our James Webb Telescope, and oh my.
The first 2.5 minutes lift Artemis off Earth and build momentum.
Really help us answer some of astronomy's biggest questions.
It's another 6 minutes of pressing uphill, accelerating to orbit. This is followed by a push from the second stage to raise Orion higher.
And once all the systems are cleared to continue, the second stage will fire again and push Orion beyond the bounds of Earth. At this point, we're going to the moon. It'll take several days to reach our destination, but as we sprint across the void, many new procedures and systems will be tested and proven.
240,000 miles later, Orion will enter an oval-shaped orbit around the moon, one that will take Orion to about 60 miles above the lunar surface and then out to 40,000 miles beyond the moon. This is a distance farther than any human-rated spacecraft has ever gone before.
As momentous as reaching the moon will be, returning to Earth is just as significant and challenging. Every observation we make, every lesson we learn on this journey prepares the way for humans to safely venture out and return home. And so on its final lap around the moon, Orion will ignite its main engine, push out of lunar orbit, and begin the long trek home.
This is a spacecraft built for the harsh conditions of deep space, as well as the intensity of returning home. Nearing Earth, Orion separates from the main power and propulsion systems of the European Service Module and prepares for the final sequence of events. Entering Earth's atmosphere at 24,500 miles per hour, the heat shield endures the fury of re-entry. The air around Orion reaches temperatures half as hot as the sun, but also slows Orion considerably. until finally, parachutes can deploy, allowing Orion to gently dip into the Pacific Ocean.
To the moon and safely home again. This is the journey of Artemis 1, and it will set the precedent for all that follows. United with partners around the world, this is the challenge we choose. To meet hand in hand, step by step, lighting the way from the Earth to the moon to Mars and beyond. We are ready.
Okay, thanks for joining me again. Hopefully we don't get copyrighted for that, but it is my tax dollars that pay for this program, so we should be okay, hopefully. So this is where we're at. Artemis is about to launch in about 15 minutes is their T-minus time currently. That could definitely change. I'm gonna fix this window. Depending, I don't know how many people have followed this launch program, but they've had considerable issues with launching. This will be several attempts later that they'll be trying to launch this rocket. So we're hoping for the best, and go Artemis, go NASA. I'll be here to keep everyone company. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to throw it in the chat and I will get to it for sure. And also, for those who don't know, the Artemis program is NASA's return to the moon mission. They will be returning to the moon for the first time since the 60s, when the Apollo program landed successfully on the moon. So it's a very exciting time. It paves our way for further exploration of the moon and Mars, and it's really an exciting time for space travel. So we're all super excited. I hope this goes off without a hitch. This is an unmanned program, so there will be no astronauts on board this first Artemis 1. I'll be listening as well to different sources to cover different things as far as progress and things of that nature. They already, if they plan to launch in T-minus 13 minutes, they have already loaded fuel and several other things in the countdown. I can... As we see, Kamala Harris is there meeting with NASA to see the launch. So here's kind of how it goes. Launch minus 47 hours, 40 minutes and counting. The launch stream arrives and the countdown begins, followed by the countdown clock beginning. Things like the water tank are filled for sound suppression. LOX and L2 hydrogen start loading into the vehicle. the Orion spacecraft is powered, if not already powered to the call stations. Interim cryogenic propulsion is powered, core stage is powered, and final prep for the RS-25 engines that will power the core stage, or the main stage, to space. At L-32, or launch minus 32 hours, the core stage composite overwrap pressure vessel, mouthful, is pressurized to flight pressure using helium. The ICPS is powered down. The Orion flight batteries begin charging. The core stage flight batteries begin charging, and powers start coming for launch. 15 hours and counting. Non-essential personnel leave Launch Complex 39B. The ground launch sequencer, so the computers that will tell the spacecraft to launch, start going. Air to gaseous nitrogen, so N2 is changed over and begins inerting the cavity, so pressing out the helium and filling it with nitrogen. The 10 hours 40 minutes, launch team conducts a weather and tanking brief and go or no go to begin tanking the rocket. And then they start chilling down the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen into the core stage. You have to cool it very, very slowly, because if not, the different lines and different hardware can crack or stress unnecessarily. It's very hot and very cold in rocket engines, so you have to do this very, very slowly. The core stage, so 8 hours, T-minus 8 hours. Core stage locks, propulsion system chill down. They start to slow fill the core stage with liquid hydrogen. And then they start doing a different slow and fast fill of both oxygen and hydrogen. Do things like start bleeding the engines. From there we get to the 5 hours and counting. And there's a bunch of chill downs and filling that starts. They top and replenish it, because the hot Florida sun, it sets out and you get boil over, because we're talking around negative 400 degrees on these fuels. They're very, very cold. So 50 minutes and counting. The NASA test director briefing is held, so they start holding briefings and make sure everything's go. T-minus 40 minutes, built-in 30-minute countdown hold begins. So T-minus 15 minutes in hold, launch director pulls the team for go to launch, and it looks like we are in a hold window at the current time. So we are in a hold for Artemis. This is a normal hold that's built into that T-minus 40 minutes. So it is normal for this to happen. They built in a 30-minute countdown hold. Very normal. Okay, so new information from NASA, as I just said that, make me eat my words, NASA. They have an issue. They are working through an issue yet again. Not ideal, but not shocking or surprising. So that's where we're at. To finish with the countdown, the T-minus 10 minutes, there are many things that start with APUs, go signals, hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. They do a bunch of pressurizing. They start up the RS-25 engines, which has been a source of their problems before. So if they just tried to light the RS-25s, that's probably not great. So, and then of course at T-minus 0, booster ignition, umbilical separation, and liftoff. So that's kind of what happens, and that's kind of where we're at. So it could be a lot of different things from this point. So they held right at 10 minutes, and that points to an engine startup issue, but they could have been troubleshooting an earlier issue, and it kind of bled into the RS-25s. So again, not something that's crazy or has never happened before, but it's not a great sign of things to come. So we're going to keep watching it and hope that we actually get a launch tonight. But as I said, we are currently in a hold. My money is on, yet again, that it would be that issue with the startup of the engines. NASA hasn't determined. They did make comment that it was in the firing room. So again, that's just another piece of data that points us to the fact that it could very well be that issue with the engines that's plagued them from the first rollout of this spacecraft. If it is an engine issue with the amount of troubleshooting and unfortunate circumstance they've been through, I would not count on it taking off today, but fingers crossed that we can see a launch this evening. So, this is the Marshall Space Flight Center that they're showing on the screen currently at Huntsville, Alabama, at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. This is one of the very few facilities that I've never personally been to. Been to Kennedy many times. Been around to different centers, but I have never been to Huntsville. So there's been a lot of fanfare around this because of the return to the moon, and it's a rocket, so people show up anyways to see it. I have very slim hopes that we actually get a successful launch this evening, but again, we'll hope for the best. So this is an interview. I guess I can put on the audio for a little bit for the interview.
Thrilled to be watching the sister program launch and seeing at the beginning.
Look at the goosebumps. That tells it all right here. I'm totally thrilled to be here.
Now, and you were actually telling me that you have a personal connection to this rocket as well. You know some people who have worked on it. What do you think it feels like being here? How does it feel for you to see something that's the culmination of so many years of hard work?
Yeah, I think it's crazy when you think about how long it takes to build it and stuff. Like, I wasn't even born last time people tried to get to the moon. So it's awesome. I think it's so exciting, and I cannot wait.
And we have a ton of people who are working tonight still on call, and so we just want to tell them words of encouragement. What more do you have to say?
Oh, I hope it goes tonight.
Megan, back to you.
Go Artemis.
Woo! Go Artemis. Yes, I love that. And again, I just love these drone shots that we're showing of all the people who are here ready, hoping, anticipating launch today. So now let's head back over to Dan. So Dan is in the Apollo Saturn V Center, which is right next to this crowd that you're seeing here. He's inside there, and he's going to tell us more about SLS using an interactive state-of-the-art tool we're calling the Moonboard.
That's right, Megan, and everybody, welcome back to the Moonboard. So just to recap, SLS out on the pad, on the mobile launcher. Daryl's been walking you through all of the tanking, all of the preparation. We had that hydrogen leak that was in the base of the mobile service structure here. That's been remedied. We haven't had any issue with those tail umbilicals that we were tracking so closely back in August and September. So everything looking really good with SLS. Just to recap, most powerful rocket we have ever built. It's propelled by 2 solid rocket boosters and 4 engines on this core stage. Now these solid rocket boosters are going to be firing for the first roughly 2 minutes of the flight, a little more than 2 minutes. And we call them solids because of the type of propellant in there. If you forgot it already, it's aluminum powder, ammonium perchlorate, and polybutadiene acrylonitrile. It's a binding agent that's inside. Solid propellants are extremely stable. They're very reliable. But once you ignite them, they're going to keep burning. You can't really throttle them up and down like you can with liquid-fueled engines. You can throttle just based.
Okay, we can watch his thing, but we'll go ahead and talk about what we were talking about, just so I don't get copyright claimed so early in the beginning. So with this particular rocket, this is called the Artemis program. It was chosen because it was the twin sister of Apollo in Greek mythology. So this is going to be a follow-up to the Apollo program. We're going to do different things, but some of the same things. We are using very old technology for a brand new rocket. With the development, NASA spent about $5 billion with a B dollars on this system, and ended up reusing a lot of things that they had already used. Not money well spent, if you ask me. So they reused the RS-25 engines that were on the shuttle program, or the space shuttle, built by Rocketdyne, or Aerojet Rocketdyne. They're powerful engines, they're reliable engines, but they're engines that were built in the late 80s, and the technology is relatively old, especially in the world of spaceflight. This main body of the rocket here is just an extension of the same tank that they had on shuttle. They just expanded it and stretched it out a little bit. So they'll also use cryofuels, which they did in the original iteration of the rocket, or the original iteration of Space Shuttle. So they'll be using liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. They burn to produce H2O and some other byproducts, but relatively clean and burning, so less impact to the environment. And then those strap-on boosters or solid rocket boosters or SRBs are solid fuel, like he said, that are incredibly stable. However, once you light them, they just go. There's no throttle control. There's no cutting them off. There's no oops. They are 2 minutes of burn time. They produce about 2.2 million pounds of thrust. And they go. And they burn until they burn out, and then they drop off. The other thing, many have seen the SpaceX program, I would think. One of the things with the SpaceX program is the fact that they are reusable and they're using new technologies. Well, that is not occurring with this rocket. This rocket is fully expendable. The main stage and the boosters will drop into the ocean and be lost forever. That top stage with the RL-10 engine will propel the Orion spacecraft into orbit, where it will disconnect and become space junk. The Orion space capsule is designed to return back to Earth, burn up, or not burn up, hopefully, and hit our atmosphere and come back down to Earth and land in the ocean where they'll be recovered. So it's a very old technology, not a lot of innovation, but NASA is a legacy program, and that's the way they like to do things. They like to keep it reliable and something they've done before instead of innovating. One of the reasons I don't work for NASA. So, part of the Artemis mission is the fact that they're going to become a base camp of sorts for the moon. The dream is that we don't just go to the moon, walk, pick up a couple of rocks, return home, and not go back for 50 years. The idea is that we'll do several things. We'll have the Orion spacecraft, which will take our astronauts to and from on a figure 8 pattern from Earth to the moon, back to Earth for landing. There'll be a bunch of exploration ground systems, such as rovers and different technology implements that will be capable of exploring on the surface of the moon. A couple other things that you'll have is Lunar Gateway, and Lunar Gateway will be responsible for docking and keeping astronauts. So the idea is Orion will take you into orbit around the moon. It will rendezvous with Gateway. It will attach, and then the Lunar Gateway will have attached to it what they call the HLS, or Human Lander System. The Human Lander System will go down to the surface and then take back off the surface, rendezvous back with the Gateway, and the astronauts will pick up transfer and go back on another Orion back to Earth and keep a permanent presence there. The last will be the Artemis Base Camp, and that will be something that will be habitation on the surface of the moon. So they don't necessarily only have 2 or 3 days. We can stay there and make that permanent presence. So with Artemis 1, this is the unmanned test flight that they're going to develop, kind of a proof of concept. And Artemis 2 should be in 2025 if Artemis 1 goes to plan, which it's not. And Artemis 2 will become a manned mission. So it'll be the first female. So that's exciting, and we'll see what happens there. I think it will be pushed back. And then Artemis 3 is actually a SpaceX mission that will utilize Starship to land on the surface of the moon. So there's plenty still coming up, and I'm excited. I would be happy to go to the moon at any time. I am going to leave everyone with NASA's broadcast for just a few moments. I'm going to go listen to Mission Control and reach out to some people and see what we have going on and if I can get any insight.
Incredibly exciting to be part of this Artemis team. It still feels pretty surreal to think that I might one day walk on the moon.
To see a woman and a person of color on the surface of the moon, to be able to say that space is for everyone and that we go to space to make life better here on Earth for everyone. I know that tears will be in my eyes.
My message to women and girls out there is to find your passion, whatever that is.
Don't let anyone tell you what you can do or can't do. Only you can realize your dreams.
Space is for everyone. And if me being in this role helps to send that message, I think that's a great thing.
And I just actually love that I don't feel like a woman at NASA. I just feel like a person at NASA.
The women of NASA are Artemis, and we make a difference every day.
I am NASA's Spacewalk Office Hardware Manager.
I'm the Program Scientist for Space Biology.
I'm the Director of NASA's Johnson Space Center.
I am Artemis.
I am Artemis.
私は Artemis です。Yo soy Artemis.
Us some Artemis.
Ana.
Je suis.
Ich bin
I
Artemis.
am Artemis.
I am Artemis.
I just love the way that that video ends with you and all these other women saying, I am Artemis. What do you think? Why is it so powerful to just hear those three words, I am Artemis? Why does that resonate so much?
I think it just represents how far we've come since the Apollo era and how we take advantage of the incredible diversity our country has to offer. Having seats at the table for everyone, you know, space is for everyone. You heard that a few times in the video, and I think we're proving that out every single day in our work, not just at NASA, but with our international partners. I think it's so important to our ability to succeed on these really complex missions.
Yeah, I thought that was a very powerful video, and I'm glad that people got that message, young girls in particular. Another person who you saw in that video is Pam Melroy. She's a former astronaut and NASA's deputy administrator. So why don't we head over to Jasmine Hopkins, because Pam is there with her now.
Thank you so much, Megan. Yes, I'm honored now to be joined by Pam Melroy, NASA Deputy Administrator. This is just a fantastic night. And we just saw that powerful video with you among so many of the great women here at NASA. What is so important about us now being ready to send, you know, the first woman, the first person of color to the moon?
Yeah, I loved watching that video. Just inspires me. So many of those women are my friends, but also they're just such fantastic engineers and scientists and just so many roles at the agency. I've always thought one of the strongest teams that you could ever find is a family, and families have men and women, and so our teams are stronger, I think, when we have that balance and that diversity. So that was exciting. But for me, I was a part of the Apollo generation, and I was very inspired by, you know, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Mike Collins on Apollo 11 and all the Apollo astronauts. I just cannot even imagine the inspiration, though, for a little girl. I mean, it never occurred to me that I wanted to be an astronaut, but of course there were no women astronauts then. I think what's going to happen now with the Artemis generation is that that first woman and the first person of color is just going to have a huge impact on the next generation.
Right. We are just watching with bated breath, and I know that it's going to mean so much to little kids to look up to them. And we understand, too, this is a huge, I mean, when we launch Artemis, it's going to be a global accomplishment. We have the Artemis Accords, which are helping us make sure we explore peacefully. Can you tell us more about those?
Yeah, it's really important, actually, especially because you know, unlike in Apollo, where it was actually just a few countries that had the capability to go to space, now those capabilities are proliferating throughout the world. And so what we do with the rocket is really important, and how we go is just as important. And how we go is as teams and with our partners, and with a sense of the responsibility that we have as we go out into the solar system to do it peacefully for scientific purposes and responsibly.
Right. Pam, you have a great sense of teamwork, and this is definitely not our first time. You know, there's a lot of things that go into testing out a first-time vehicle. There's actually dynamic activity going on right now. So how does this first flight test of SLS compare to other first times, you know, with Shuttle or with Saturn V before that?
Well, I can do even better as a test pilot, right? So there's a history there. In fact, the amazing thing about this is, so first flight of a first aircraft, you actually taxi it out to the end of the runway and then run down the runway and come back and check all the data. And then you might take off once and go around the pattern and come back and land. This is a little bit like taking off and going to fly a full mission on your very first flight of an aircraft. And so everything has to be right. So this compares it's very similar to the experiences that all new rocket developments have, where, it's not just about learning the hardware, that's a big piece of it, but it's also about gelling that team together and your procedures and how you're going to deal with issues that come up, because they will come up. They always come up.
Exactly. And you have that experience as a test pilot, but also as a former astronaut. In that video, we saw you getting your induction into the Astronaut Hall of Fame, which is pretty cool. So what is your perspective, or what advice do you have for the Artemis astronauts, those ones that are going to maybe set foot on the moon?
Oh, well, they don't need my advice. I'd love to elbow them out of the way and go to the moon too. But they are fantastic. I mean, I'm so proud of all of our astronauts. I was just talking to Jessica Watkins, who just came back on Crew 4. This generation is prepared, ready, and excited. And I think they're really excited that we're putting science front and center in the Artemis program too. We're going to learn so much about the solar system from the moon, and even about the Earth. And so I think the astronauts are really excited about doing that hands-on science, and they are ready to go.
Right, I know they're ready to go, and maybe you are as well. But Artemis 1 is just the beginning. Then we have Artemis 2 and on. We're learning so much. What do you think about this just forward movement that we're making right now?
Well, it's really important. This is the Artemis campaign is actually part of a multi-decade effort that we're doing right now, which is really with the goal of creating a blueprint for how we're going to explore with humans and do science throughout the solar system. So we're going to learn through the Artemis campaign on the moon, and then we're going to go demonstrate it on Mars, and then the next destination, who knows where.
Right. I mean, we're going so much further than we ever have before. Pam Melroy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Go Artemis.
Of course, go Artemis. Megan, back to you.
Thank you both for that interview. Now, teams over at NASA's Johnson Space Center are also monitoring today's launch attempt. So why don't we go back over there with Leah to tell us what's going on over there.
Thanks, Megan. And you're right, teams here in Mission Control Houston continue to monitor today's events. Again, they will really kick into action once we have liftoff, and they'll remain on console all the way through splashdown. But quickly, I have to show you something, a little show and tell. It makes me feel like the coolest kid in school. I've got a moon rock here. I hope you can get a good shot of it. It is from Apollo 15, 1971. And when it was brought back to Earth, it was part of a larger rock. In total, it was 21 pounds. This is, of course, a smaller section of that. But we're looking forward to the Artemis program and being able to go back to the moon so that we can continue to gather these kinds of samples, but this time at the lunar South Pole. We've never been there, and we've never brought samples back from that area. So we're really excited to see what might differ in those samples and the ones that we have here. Now, of course, we've got a whole laboratory of scientists that are able to study all of those samples. We just opened some up for the first time earlier this year, so that we're able to test with new technology everything that we can learn about these samples that we brought back now 50 years ago. So hopefully within the next few years, we're bringing some new ones back to use that same experimental process on and tell us a little bit more about the moon. But just had to show this off. Apollo 15 moon rock. We're looking forward to having some Artemis ones here at Johnson Space Center. With that, I will send it back to you at KSC.
you were a cool kid before you even had the moon rock, so. But now you're even a cooler kid. Now, the name Artemis was chosen because in Greek mythology, she's the twin sister of Apollo. NASA's Leo Martin is over at the nearby Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, where thousands have gathered to watch today's launch attempt.
Hi, Megan. I'm actually joined here tonight by a very special group of guests here from Stennis visiting Kennedy Space Center. Why don't you tell me, Ryan, what it is that ties you to tonight's launch?
So we were lucky and privileged enough to be able to test the core stage of the SLS rocket that's going to launch today. We got to green run, which is a full duration hot fire. It's a very historic time for us at Stennis. It was so exciting to be a part of. It was 7 years of hard work by a lot of really great people.
And Jack, sorry about
just so excited to be here to see it.
And Jack, you were actually telling me that you know firsthand, how much work has gone into tonight's launch. What does it feel like to be here tonight, seeing the rocket fully integrated on the pad, ready to go?
Man, I'm just incredibly grateful to be a part of this history and just really excited to see this thing launch.
And Barry, you were telling me that you know also firsthand, the adversity that these teams have overcome to be here tonight.
So one of the really cool things about the samples that NASA has from the moon from the 60s, from the Apollo program, they have a crazy chain of custody on any of those samples. They weigh them coming in and going out. They know to a very small degree how much of the sample, if you're cutting it, there's special procedure for the dust, all kinds of things. So, and they have to be returned because it is illegal to possess a piece of the moon. The only ones are at a facility that is controlled by NASA, that were returned by NASA, and any of the experimented dusts or pieces of rocks, even if you break a moon rock, you have to have permission to do so. Of course, you have to request it, and then you have to count and weigh and all kinds of meticulous steps to be able to experiment on those rocks. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the penalty is for not returning them all, but I know that it's very, very well controlled, and the pieces and parts have to be returned in very good shape so they can further test on them due to the limited amount that we have on the surface of Earth. It was very well controlled when it was brought back. It was placed in different storage containers to keep the atmosphere and our Earth's chemical makeup from doing anything to make the samples have any interaction from the Earth. So they wanted to keep them as if they were doing sampling and techniques on the surface of the moon and not concerning themselves with all the pollution and things that are specific to our Earth. So that was something that was really interesting to me and something that I was really excited to know. We are now in an official delay. I'm going to let you guys listen in.
At T-minus 10 minutes and counting. And so that puts us off the 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time launch. We're now slipping indefinitely into the hold. And NASA Test Director Carlos Monge saying that we are currently estimating how much work needs to be done before resuming the polling that is supposed to take place 15 minutes before launch. It then goes to terminal count at T-minus 10 minutes. Now we've got an update on the tanking of the upper stage liquid hydrogen tank. Currently 95% filled. We're in topping on that tank. It is the last of 4 tanks in the Space Launch System that needed to be completely fueled up before we launch. Of course, cryogenic tanking, a complex operation that has seen some delays tonight. We had a roughly hour delay after a replenish valve on the core stage liquid hydrogen side required hands-on work by a Red Crew team that went out to the launch pad and tightened down some bolts on the valve and got it fixed before leaving the launch pad, and then launch team verifying that that work was complete. Now currently we're awaiting some work with the range. The 45th Space Wing, which oversees the range here, and makes sure that the airspace and the ocean out over the flight path is clear, and also has the responsibility to destruct the rocket should it go off track. They have been working on some issues with their equipment and sending a flight termination signal to the rocket. There is testing that must happen with the flight termination system that was delayed by a bad Ethernet switch. Switch has been changed out, and now the range is looking to start testing their connectivity to the rocket in order to preserve that safety function that they are responsible for. So again, we are slipping now indefinitely into the launch window. We're awaiting the launch team to evaluate just how much time is required to complete the work to get this rocket ready to launch. And of course, when we have a new T0 for you, we'll report that out right away. Megan, back to you.
Daryl, thank you so much. As NASA prepares to explore the moon, here's a look at the spacesuits and tools that will help us to do that.
So, not a great sign from NASA. I gotta do that differently. So, what they were saying is the same pressure valve issue that has plagued them this entire time is acting up yet again. They say it's fixed, but they've said it's fixed every time. And then also the other thing is they were talking about the flight termination system and a system that was unable to be worked into that as well. So they haven't scrubbed yet, but they are it's not looking good again.
Apollo astronauts had literally hundreds of hours of training in geology before they flew to the moon. It's often said that the Apollo astronauts had the equivalent of a master's degree in geology by the time they flew to the moon. In the intervening decades since Apollo, we've been training astronauts who fly to the International Space Station because when they're on the ISS, they spend time observing the Earth, looking out the window, taking pictures of what they see on the Earth's surface. Now that we're looking at putting astronauts on the surface of the moon, we also take them into the field. We take them to field sites here on Earth that resemble field sites that we expect them to see on the moon.
That's the reason why we take them out into places that are unique, like volcanic landscapes or places that are analogous to the lunar surface, to train them on the scale and fidelity of science that you just can't recreate in these facilities.
And so by combining this classroom and field training, we're able to prep them for fundamentals of geology, the major driving lunar science questions that we have that we hope to address with the Artemis program, and teaching them how to do field work in relevant analog environments.
For just science aspects of developing new spacesuits, can it get you to where you need to go? And then once you get there, can you do the cool science that you need to do? And so that's, can you move effectively and efficiently in the suit to be able to collect the samples or use the tools or the instruments? For the visibility, it's like, can you make the necessary observations that you need to? Or does the suit have the lights on it that it needs to illuminate the surface and make the observations you need to? The lunar South Pole holds tremendous resources that are going to allow us to continue to explore. This is a place that we've never been before. There's so much to be learned from getting boots on the ground and exploring a unique place that challenges us as humans and also helps us develop technologies that make our everyday life that much better.
We think there might be volatiles present at the South Pole. By using these volatiles, we'll be able to do things like create drinking water, create rocket fuel to launch astronauts back to Earth. And so by harnessing the power of the land, we'll be able to help astronauts establish that long-term sustainable presence.
It's human nature to explore. Pushing our boundaries and exploring our universe is, I think, just one of those things that's just stuck in our human nature, and that we need to do it in order to understand the world around us, including our Earth and our solar system.
We just heard there how curiosity is just a part of us. So, with that in mind, why don't we do some social questions? Because some people are very curious to hear what you have to say about their questions. So why don't we pull up the first question here? What are your thoughts on the responsibilities that come with going to space? Obviously a question for you. I am not going to space.
Yeah, the opportunity to travel to space comes with a lot of responsibility. I think for all of us, it's a huge honor to be a part of these teams, and the work we're doing is so critical in supporting scientific discovery on the ground. So on the International Space Station, we're a national laboratory. Our crew executed over 350 different scientific experiments during our 6-month mission. And so when you think about that, it's years of work to get one of these payloads or an experiment on the space station. Yes. And sometimes that's someone's life's work you're holding in your hands and executing. And so being prepared for those moments is really important, and understanding how to bring the team from the ground into solving complex problems. We take that really, really seriously. And of course, we want to share what that experience is like. Only a few people have been able.
So NASA is incredibly disappointing, in my opinion, with this in particular. They had months to try and get this all fixed and worked out and all around, and I have no idea what they've been doing. Like they said, they had an issue with a circuit board that transmitted data, so like a basic wireless card. So I mean, I don't know if there was, I would hope that it wouldn't be faulty and they didn't not test it, but you also never know if they potentially, over currented something and blew it out. I mean, but you had so much time. You had it back in the vehicle assembly building. You had the opportunity to go through these things and really be able to kind of suss it out and figure out what was going on with this rocket. And something that small and that ridiculous could have thrown this whole process off. Now, I know that they are complex systems. I know that for a fact. Like, they are very complex. There are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of things that could go wrong. But you have supposedly the most the best people in their field working on something that is being watched by people all over the world with nearly an unlimited budget. And it's really quite annoying that you're not able to make everything work so that it can take off on the third or fourth attempt. And another thing with this attempt is if they're not able to launch during this attempt, they're going to have to scrap this rocket. They've fueled and detanked it far too many times. The seals are only made for one-time use, and with the cryofuels and the warming and cooling, the Florida, the Florida air with all the humidity, and then you have the cryofuels pumping through the system and all that kind of things, then it's just frustrating. Because again, this is a $4.7 billion rocket that will likely have to be scrapped if it doesn't get off the pad tonight. So we are 3 minutes past the launch window start. So now we start getting into worry territory. We are still in a hold. They have actually even took down the timer on the upper left-hand corner of the NASA footage. So we're no longer holding at 10 minutes. There could be a recycle hold. It looks like there's possibly even a vent at the top. I mean, I can't tell if that's a ton of vent or just a little bit of vents. It could be, who knows? So, I don't know. So the hope is that we still launch. Again, it's not looking great. We're now about 4 minutes past the open of the window. It is a 3-hour window, but if they are having issues and haven't fixed them in the last 2 months, then they're likely not going to fix them in the next 2.5, 3 hours. So we will stand by and keep watching, and fingers crossed for the best.
Regolith, an ice drill for exploring new terrain, and M-Solo, the mass spectrometer observing lunar operations. Trident will drill up to 3 feet into the lunar surface, extract lunar soil, and bring it up to the surface. Trident drills to its maximum depth in multiple phases, stopping at different increments. As it reaches each desired depth, it will pause and retract the drill string to deposit lunar soil on the surface for analysis. This is where M-Solo comes in. M-Solo is a commercial off-the-shelf mass spectrometer modified for spaceflight. It will evaluate the chemical elements and compounds released from the lunar soil for water and other chemical compounds. Trident will then proceed to the next specified depth and repeat the process until samples at all desired depths have been analyzed for water. If no ice is found where Prime 1 lands, NASA will still collect valuable information about drilling into the lunar soil for a future mission. NASA's Viper, the Volatiles Investigating Polar Exploration rover, will use Prime 1 technology on a mobile robot that will navigate the Moon's south pole searching for additional resources. Prime 1 data will help NASA assess lunar resources to inform future Artemis missions and a robust human presence on the Moon.
So we are still awaiting a new T0 for today's launch attempt, but for more on what to expect when we launch for this first day, let's go to NASA's Dan Hewitt. He's inside our Apollo Saturn V Center at the KSC Visitor Complex.
Hey, thanks, Megan. Everybody, welcome back to the moon board. There's a lot of people here in the complex.
Launch,
I just heard a
which is
woo-hoo. People are getting in and out because we have a great view of launch when it's going to happen, and it's going to happen today. But that launch is just the first step in the Artemis 1 mission. So let's look at what's ahead for this historic first flight. As we just said, launch is step number 1. Those 4 RS-25 engines throttle up, followed shortly after by the 2 solid rocket boosters igniting, sending SLS and Orion skyward. Now on our way uphill, we'll have a number of jettison events. You'll be able to see things coming off of the SLS rocket. One of the most visual ones will be these 2 solid rocket boosters. Now they'll expend their propellant a little over 2 minutes into the flight. They will separate. We'll see them flare off onto either side, and then the core stage continues to fire. We're also going to see the launch abort system come off the top. Once you get high enough in the atmosphere, it's no longer required. You could actually do aborts using engines on Orion and its service module. I will also note that on the launch abort system, it's got those 3 solid rocket motors. The jettison motor is active. The abort and the attitude ones are not for this flight. We don't have people, so we're not flying a fully active abort system. We also have 3 fairings that are there to protect Orion, the service module and the crew module, as we're flying up through the really dense parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Next up, we'll hit core stage separation. So we've got 4 main engines. We'll hear MECO, main engine cutoff. Those engines will shut down. The core stage will separate, drop away. It's eventually going to splash down in the ocean. And that hands over the propulsion duties to this, our upper stage, the Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage, or ICPS. Its first job is to execute what's known as a perigee raise maneuver. So the perigee is the lowest part of your orbit. You have a perigee, that's your low part, and an apogee, that's your highest point. We're going to raise up the perigee, and that's going to actually put us in a nice circular path around the planet. And while we're there, that gives us time to check out Orion. We're flying it in space for the second time, the first time in this fully integrated stack with SLS. We'll be able to look at all of Orion's systems, make sure those solar arrays are capturing the sun's energy and turning it into electrical power for Orion's systems, make sure the communications are working, all of our guidance, navigation, and control. That is your time to make sure you have a healthy spacecraft before you do something that is going to send it to the moon. And that's next up on our list. That's the trans-lunar injection. For today's launch profile, that's going to be a firing of about 18 minutes of that single engine on the upper stage. Now that engine optimized for a vacuum. It's producing about 24,000 pounds of thrust. So it's a pretty big engine, and it's doing that because we need enough energy to be able to send our payload, Orion, beyond low Earth orbit and send it on a path to head out to the moon.
So like I
now,
said,
after that burn is complete, ICPS separates. It's going to do what's called a disposal burn. So it's going to send itself on a path from Earth around the moon and slingshot out into what's known as a heliocentric orbit. So it's going to completely leave the Earth-Moon system and go into orbit around our sun. But after it separates, propulsion duties get handed over to this, the European Service Module. And it's got a couple of different engines that it's going to be using, and we're going to be testing those out just on day 1. We're going to do what's called the Outbound Trajectory Correction Burn 1. And we'll do a couple of these trajectory corrections as we're flying out to the moon, but that first one is that first critical test of this large engine, the Orbital Maneuvering System engine. That's the one that has the most thrust, generating about 6,000 pounds of force in a vacuum, and that's what's going to be doing a lot of our maneuvers, or giving us that pushing power as we do these maneuvers around the moon to enter into what's known as Distant Retrograde Orbit, or DRO. And that's this dotted line that you see around here. Now we call it distant basically because of the distance we're away from the moon. We're about 40,000 miles, a little bit less, off the lunar surface. And then we call it retrograde because the moon orbiting planet Earth in this direction, going in a counterclockwise fashion, we're going to be entering into a clockwise orbit around the moon, opposite retrograde. Now to do that, we're going to get in close, we're going to dip in off the lunar surface. We're going to be about 80 statute miles off the lunar surface as we do this outbound powered flyby. Again, the major thrust coming from that Orbital Maneuvering System engine. After we do that, we'll do a final maneuver to actually go into that distant retrograde orbit, that DRO. Now, why DRO? Why are we not just going around the moon and coming back on like a free return trajectory, which we did on some of the Apollo missions? Well, in DRO, it's a very stable orbit. It doesn't require a lot of fuel to maintain that area around the moon. So it gives you a lot of time to really test the spacecraft. If you followed with any launch of a new spacecraft, you know there's only so much testing you can do on the ground. Once you actually put all of that hardware in space, in the environment that it's going to be operating, hundreds of thousands of miles away from Earth, you're going to learn things you didn't even realize about everything from communications, the life support systems, the thermal control. Everything on a spacecraft needs to get put through its paces in this environment before we put people on board, and that's why we're heading out to DRO. Eventually, though, it's going to be time to come home, and we will do a DRO departure maneuver. This, again, firing up that orbital maneuvering system engine and others on the service module, and this is what's going to commit us from leaving the moon and heading on back towards Earth. We'll dip in once more, close off the lunar surface, slingshot and use the lunar gravity to do this return-powered flyby, and then, similar to the way out, we can make correction burns as we kind of fine-tune our path back towards the Earth. And then it's time for re-entry. A couple of things happen before that. One of the really critical ones, spacecraft separation. We're going to detach the European service module shortly before re-entry. Its job largely done. That burns up in the Earth's atmosphere and reveals on the crew module the heat shield. I circled it earlier. This is goal number 1 of the Artemis mission. Artemis 1 mission is testing this heat shield at lunar return velocities, because when we make that trip around the moon and we come back, we are going in speeds of excess of 20,000 miles an hour. So when we slam into the Earth's atmosphere, it's going to heat that thing up to more than 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. For the Artemis 1 profile, we're going to do what's known as a skip re-entry. So basically, you can come in too shallow and skip off the atmosphere to narrow, and you're going to do what's known as a ballistic entry, which really heats things up. We're going to do kind of a mix where we're going to skip once off the atmosphere, and that we're still going to get the heat, but that helps to reduce some of the G loads on the crew. Once you're through that, you get to parachute deploy. There's 11 parachutes in total that are going to slow Orion down before it splashes down. We're going to be going from 20,000 miles an hour to about 300 miles an hour before those parachutes deploy, and then they do a final job of getting it in the water in the South Pacific. We've got these big orange balloons. That's an uprighting system, so even if Orion landed in the water upside down, those can inflate, and they put us back upright into what's known as stable 1. That's where you want your spacecraft to be, nice and upright in the water, especially if you're an astronaut in there floating. Now, we also have a large U.S. Navy ship with a big bay that's going to basically come up and swallow Orion into its deck, and you've got a couple of other assets in the area to help recover hardware, the forward bay cover, parachutes, things like that. But that's scheduled to happen 26 days after a launch today. So that's 26 days from liftoff here in Florida around the moon to a splashdown in the Pacific, and that will be the first mission in the Artemis program, the farthest we've ever sent a human-rated spacecraft in history, and just the first step before we put people on board. So that's a look at everything still to come. We're counting down to that launch. I'll send it back over to Megan and the team at the host desk, guys.
A very comprehensive look at that. Thank you so much, Dan. If you're just joining us, welcome to Kennedy Space.
And with that, a free return trajectory that he was talking about, during the Apollo program, they had lesser technology that they weren't sure that it could return successfully to the Earth. So they did a slingshot around the moon so that it didn't really stop if it didn't have to. So if they weren't successful, they could shoot right back to Earth, and the astronauts wouldn't be put in danger. They could be just returned to Earth from the trajectory that the Saturn placed them in. So that's what he's talking about free return trajectory.
Back to the moon, and this is why. The moon is a treasure trove of science.
It holds opportunities for us to make discoveries about our home planet, about our sun,
and about our solar system.
The wealth of knowledge to be gleaned from the moon will inspire a new generation of thought and action.
Without fail, every major program and mission NASA has invested in has led to technologies and capabilities that have shaped our culture.
The breakthroughs of the Artemis era will define our generation and the generations to follow.
The tens of thousands of jobs associated with propelling us to the moon today are just the beginning of a lunar economy that will see hundreds of thousands of new jobs develop around the world.
This is not an ambition of one entity or one country. The exploration of the moon is a shared effort,
woven together by a desire for the greater good.
Why the moon? Because the missions of tomorrow will be sparked by the accomplishments of the Artemis generation today.
Because the ambition to go has already begun.
And because Mars is calling. We need to learn what it takes to establish a community on another cosmic shore. So let's camp close before pushing out.
And so, we go to the moon now, not as a series of isolated missions, but to build a community on and around the moon capable of proving how to live on other worlds.
We'll use the lessons from more than 50 years of peaceful exploration to send a new generation to the lunar surface to stay.
We will anchor our efforts on the lunar South Pole to establish the Artemis Base Camp,
positioning us for long-term science and exploration of the lunar surface.
We will prove what it takes to assemble a complex ship in deep space.
We will perfect descending down to and returning from a distant surface.
We will learn how humans can survive and thrive in a partial gravity environment.
With improved spacesuit designs, mobile habitats, and with reconnaissance robots pre-positioning and relocating supplies.
We will learn how to utilize the resources we find on these other worlds, starting with finding water ice and purifying it to drinkable water.
And refining that into hydrogen for fuel and oxygen to breathe.
We will establish fission power plants on the surface of the moon, capable of supporting a growing community of efforts.
And we will expand the logistics supply chain to enable commercial and international partners
to resupply and refuel deep space outposts.
None of this is simple or easy, but nothing in our history ever has been.
The Eagle has landed. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
This kind of continuous lunar presence is a natural extension of all that we've learned in low Earth orbit. And what we will accomplish there will ensure the monumental missions to Mars are within reach. As we ready the launch of the first Artemis mission, and as commercial companies ready their lunar landers for the first private payload deliveries, we have already begun to take the next step.
Throughout this launch broadcast, our NASA's Leah Martin has been introducing us to people over at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex who have come out for hopefully the maiden voyage of Artemis 1. People from near and far, young and old, just really excited to hopefully see this historic flight. So now she's joined by somebody else who has a really interesting story. Leah, tell us about it.
Megan, I think one of the most exciting things about being here tonight is being with people who are like-minded, who have such a strong tie to the history of our nation's space program and their love of spaceflight. And I actually struck up an amazing conversation with Scott here, and you were telling me about the special tie that you have to tonight's launch as well.
Oh yeah, I literally grew up with NASA. My father went to work with the NACA before NASA. Went to work for Dr. Von Braun, followed him over to Marshall Space Flight Center, and became, when it became NASA. He worked on the Jupiter C, Redstone, Saturn 1, Saturn 5, and then because of that, he brought me here to see Apollo 11 launch. So that was my first launch. I was 5 years old. I loved it. Still remember the sound. That's about all. And then years later, through my flying career, I was able to bring my sons back with my friends that flew the shuttle, and they saw 5 launches and 4 landings. But basically, I wanted to be here. I was here for the first moon launch, the last moon launch back when Uncle Gene Cernan, our family friend, went to on Apollo 17. So I wanted to be here for this because it's kind of in our family, in our blood, and hopefully I'll be around for the next one when we go and land again. So that's
incredible. So you have NASA actually in your DNA, grew up with the program.
Yeah. I knew most of the German scientists. The kids sat in our lap, Dr. Ernst Sterlinger, and my father flew with von Braun because he was a general aviation pilot as well. So they'd get off work and fly, and they were in Life magazine together, National Geographic. So it was fun. I literally got to knew Al Shepard, all the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo guys, and it was an honor. I would have loved to have been an astronaut, but I went a different route, but I can still come here and see them.
We can, and we're so grateful, so thrilled to see you here tonight, and so excited that you will be able to actually compare the last launch and the sound of the last one with the one tonight. It's absolutely going to rock the sky.
I want it to be even louder. I want to feel it. Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's been an honor to meet you, and Megan, we're going back to you.
Leah, thank you so much for sharing that. That was such a fun story. Here we are now at Space Center Houston. This is a live look inside of the visitor center there. Lots of people hoping to see the launch today. I love this guy in the front with his NASA shirt representing. And again, just seeing children and young and old, just all these people who feel captivated and are excited about our next giant leap into deep space. So glad to have them here. Oh my gosh, I love this.
Yeah, the team in Marshall and Huntsville there is always ready for their shot, waving their flags. They're super pumped. That's the home to the SLS program office, so they have a dog in the fight tonight, seeing Artemis launch for the first time.
Is that an inflatable astronaut in the center? Do you see that? I think somebody is dressed up as an astronaut.
Look at that.
Yeah,
they're
representing.
Ready to go.
I love this. Yeah, I'm so glad that they're there. Again, these visitor centers are closed to the public, but the people there decided to hold a watch party.
Oh,
and
look,
that's
our
exciting
friends
to
in
see.
Germany are ready for us this time.
I know,
they
clapping.
anticipated the delay. They look pumped and ready to go.
So these are employees of Airbus. Airbus is the main contractor for the European Space Agency, and together they provided the European service module for the Orion spacecraft. So really, we should be applauding them. They shouldn't be applauding. Thank you so much, guys, for your contribution to the program, and can't wait to see Orion and SLS launch. Okay, so now let's head back over to Daryl Nail over with the launch team so we can hear any updates about a new T0.
Yeah, Megan, thank you. And a clearer picture is starting to emerge as the launch team now reports out that they only have a few minutes left of work to do before they're ready to pick up polling. And we're also hearing that some of that polling, which kicks off with the mission management team, is also now just about 3.5 minutes away. Now, we are currently still in that hold. But the launch team, NASA's test director, is continuing to move the team forward. We've wrapped up work on the upper stage and the lower stage. You're looking now live inside Firing Room 1, where Launch Director Charlie Blackwell-Thompson is overseeing her launch team. We've had a number of delays that have put us off the T0, but we are starting to track to a T0 close to around a quarter till, top of the hour. But we do need to have some polling that takes place. I'm pausing now because I'm listening in to the teams as they communicate.
So there's some further testing that needs to be done, but they're working on fixing the issues that are currently
in this launch window,
there.
Which we're currently 26 minutes into, and it's 2 hours long. It runs until 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time. We have what's called 40 cutouts. And in those cutouts, They range from about a second to about a minute. These are times where they can't launch. These cutouts must be accounted for when determining a new T0.
And cutouts will be due to weather or...
The upper stage of the rocket, which was the last to get ready and configured, just recently the team cycled the liquid hydrogen valves, which is required, and they are currently working on the LO2 valves, liquid oxygen valves in the upper stage. That work is almost done.
Or it could possibly be something downrange. They have to clear all the way to Europe as far as weather is concerned, shipping lanes.
We are now a minute and a
paths.
half away from the pole of the mission management team
For the launch abort system.
which is several minutes before T-minus 15 minutes.
I think this is important, and then I will mute after he's
When that
finished
poll
with his
starts,
update.
we'll get a clearer picture of our T0.
So about 3 more minutes is what's anticipated, and then they can get back into their polling.
NASA's test director has informed the launch team to all switch to a common communication channel. It's called 232. And what this means is that
fix the problem
the
and they
entire
can go
launch
back
team
live.
is now on one channel, and all future communication will happen there, whereas there are many channels.
So
now
it's a
they
public
reduce it down to one.
Public frequency. Prior, they would have had it on a shielded frequency for
Just
fixing
heard from NASA test director Jeff Spaulding. Jeff Spaulding's on. They swapped out. There are currently no constraints to launch. Great news. Again, no constraints to launch. And they're getting ready to pick up with a poll to determine readiness for launch.
I'll keep an eye on that, and I'll let you guys know if there's anything that needs to be put back on, and then I'll throw him back on. What he was talking about is the cutouts. So there could be a shipping lane, there could be an aircraft overhead, many different things that there actually could be in regards to ensuring safety if there needs to be an abort of the launch, and that needs to be cleared for quite a distance until the spacecraft is at an altitude high enough for it to not come back to Earth, essentially. So any of that time where it can come back to Earth.
So we are getting close.
NASA is about to begin.
We're going to pull up the audio now so that you can listen in.
Great. We're going to get to listen to the go, no-go.
Go. And rock. Rockets go.
This checking all the
All right,
systems,
copy all.
the separate
and Launch Director
employees
NTD,
are
our
looking
launch
at
team
their
is ready to
screens
proceed at this
and
time.
their systems.
I copy all NTD. At this time, I will proceed with my poll.
And I assume that they're good.
And attention on 232, this is the Launch Director performing the final poll for launch. Verify no constraints and go for launch. EGS Program Chief Engineer.
EGS Program Chief Engineer verifies that the EGS, SLS, and Orion Program Chief Engineers have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, Greg. Thank you. EGS Chief Safety Officer.
The EGS CSO verifies the SLS, Orion, and EGS CSOs have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, John. Thank you. Range weather. Weather has no constraints and weather is go for launch. Copy LWO and Mission Manager.
And we should be at that 10-minute
and
hold
Mission Manager,
after
Launch Director.
the go no-go poll. So
Launch Director, Mission
15
Manager
minutes from
on
now.
232. The mission management team has been pulled. You have a go to proceed with terminal count and launch of Artemis 1.
I copy all. Thank you. And NTD, Launch Director.
Go ahead, Launch Director.
Yes, sir. On behalf of all the men and women across our great nation who have worked to bring this hardware together to make this day possible, and for the Artemis generation, this is for you. At this time, I give you a go to resume count and launch Artemis 1.
Copy, Launch Director, and thank you. All right, we do have a couple of steps to configure, and then we will be ready to resume the clock. CVSE, NTD. CVSE here. Initiate recording of Orion cameras at this time. In work. NTD.
So everything's looking good, and
perform the booster ignition
be
SNA arm rotation enable.
Good count, and go Artemis.
NDT,
go
RSR,
NASA.
booster ignition SNA arm and rotation enable is complete.
And I copy. Thank you.
Okay, so there you heard the poll from Launch Director.
Early.
Getting ready to get that new T0 time. The poll that you heard was the NASA Test Director's poll. And
all right, and we have verified no cutouts at this time. And all personnel, we are going to resume the clock. GLS, you can resume the clock on your mark.
GLS copies. Countdown clock will resume on my mark.
It's fantastic news.
3,
and one of the
2,
things that's really
1,
important
mark.
is that
GLS
they get this
mainline
right.
has been initiated.
Okay.
T-minus 10 minutes and counting.
It's much
we are
easier
T-minus
to
10
hold
minutes
it
away from
than it would
liftoff
be
of
if
Artemis 1. As you
the
can see, the
thing
clock is now
failed or decided to explode. Any of those things would be catastrophic. So they wanted to make sure that this was absolutely perfect prior to actually taking off. So that's good news. And like I said, go Artemis. From this point, I am going to pipe you back into NASA, and I am going to sit back and watch and jump in if needed.
a computer and software that is doing all of the commanding and monitoring of the Space Launch System. We'll hear call-outs from the GLS operator, Alex Pandalos. As well as NASA Test Director Jeff Spaulding. GLS is pre-tensioning the umbilicals at this very moment. You can see them as they run down the rocket. That's getting them ready to detach. At liftoff, those arms will swing away. We'll let go of the rocket in a clockwise direction. T-minus 8 minutes and counting. The GLS is performing up to 100 commands per second, including configuring ground systems for power transfer to the rocket. GLS is turning on cameras, recording video inside and outside the crew module to collect data for engineers.
Effective launch. Let's light this candle.
Purging the aft skirt booster with high flow nitrogen. Clear out any hydrogen gas that may be there.
So that's they chill the engines with the the hydrogen gas and hydrogen is
You can see the crew access arm is already retracted.
So they
when there is crew during Artemis 2,
nitrogen to
it would
clear
happen
out
at
the
T-minus
hydrogen
6
so it
minutes.
doesn't blow up.
But out of abundance of caution, they went ahead and retracted the arm well ahead of liftoff. Want to point your attention to the base of the mobile launcher. If something wasn't done to reduce the power from the pressure caused by the rocket's ignition and thunderous sound, it could damage the rocket. So the ignition overpressure and sound suppression system will flood the mobile launcher with water. You'll see that sequence start at T-minus 17 seconds.
So that is the water deluge.
Now coming up in less than 30 seconds, the ground launch sequencer will start bringing the high energy systems online, starting with core stage pressurization. Firing room 1 is completely silent as they listen for the next call.
GLS is go for core stage tank pressurization.
The core stage tank is now pressurizing to flight levels. The replenish valve to the...
And just so everyone knows, because of course very excited about the possibility of a launch, but it still could scrub, they still could hold, they still could cancel the launch. It's just less likely after the 10-minute mark, but it still can happen for sure.
Flight, the abort motor is inactive because there is no crew on board. Up next is the flight termination system, or FTS, which gives the Space Force the ability to destruct the rocket if it goes in the wrong direction. Let's listen in for that.
GLS is go for FTS arm.
The flight termination system is now armed. Coming up at 4 minutes and 40 seconds, a big moment. This is where the RS-25 engines and their bleed go to high flow. It's been a little tricky to dial in.
This is where the problem has been in the past. The high flow
GLS
bleed
go
of
for
the
LH2 high flow bleed check.
RS-25 engines. Again, old hardware that was designed for use on the space shuttle.
Good word, we've passed that. The cryo team got the LH2 engine bleed pressure loop dialed in. They are now at the right temperature for launch. Countdown continues.
Bleed as it go.
T-minus 4 minutes, 15 seconds. Up next, GLS fires up the KPUs. Those are high-speed turbines which provide pressure to hydraulic pumps that steer the RS-25s. Stands for Core Stage Auxiliary Power Unit Start.
GLS is go for core stage APU start.
That now leads to the thrust vector control test at T-minus 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That can proceed now, and we will see the engines gimbal at the bottom of the core stage.
TVC, that's the hydraulics used to move the engines so that they can steer the spacecraft.
At T-minus 3 minutes and 10 seconds, you will hear the go for purge sequence 4. That's a helium purge of the 4 core stage engines downstream of the propellant valve, getting the air and moisture out.
GLS is go for purge sequence 4.
And in just a few seconds, GLS will close the core stage LOX vent, liquid oxygen. The white vapor cloud caused from the super cold gaseous oxygen condensing the water in the atmosphere will disappear. You see it coming out there now. And there it goes, it's closed. LOX vent closed, pressure rising in the core stage LOX tank to flight levels.
The vent is closed, everything looks good.
Coming up in 15 seconds, look for that thrust vector control actuator test. Engines will gimbal. And there they go. The 4 core stage RS-25 engines gimbaling around, testing the ability to steer the rocket into space. They will operate at 109% performance. Each RS-25 throwing down a half
Let's
million
go, baby.
pounds
Get
of
your
thrust.
big ass up there.
All four, 2 million pounds. All together with the boosters, 8.8 million pounds of thrust.
GLS go for upper stage to internal power.
Now the upper stage has gone to internal power. So power is removed from the rocket's upper stage, the ICPS, and it's been switched to battery power. The same milestone is coming up for the core stage at T-minus 1 minute and 30 seconds.
So this is the time where we start worrying a little bit. This is where the last scrub happened, about T-minus 45 seconds.
GLS
So
go for core
we're
stage
gonna
to
hope that
internal power.
everything keeps going.
The rocket's core stage, which houses the 3 flight computers, is now on battery power. So there is no more hold time available because there's no more margin on the batteries. So if we have a hold, we'd have to recycle back to T-minus 10 minutes and recharge those batteries. The count continues.
And
A
there's
note
not enough
now,
recycle
shortly
time
after
in the window, so
liftoff.
it would be a scrub if they hold at this point.
1 minute.
Shortly after liftoff, Mission Control Houston will take control of the rocket, and my colleague, Leah Cheshire, will take over commentary. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. Coming up at T-minus 33 seconds, the GLS will hand off control to the ALS. This is the autonomous launch sequencer. On board the rocket, it will take over command and control of the rocket. But the ALS will check, make sure there's no holds coming from the ground up until T-minus 2
GLS
seconds.
is go for ALS.
And we are go for ALS.
Automatic
The
launch.
Space Launch
So it
System
is
is now
in control of
counting down to
itself at this
liftoff of
point.
Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon.
We should see
Launch
main
team
engine
can no longer
start
cycle
here
the
very,
count.
very soon.
Sound suppressor water now flowing
15.
under the ML.
Deluge is a go.
And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off
Candles
igniters
lit.
initiated. 7, 6, 5. Core stage engine start.
Hey, we have
3,
engine start.
2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff
And
of Artemis
liftoff
1.
of Artemis
We
1.
rise together back to the moon and beyond.
Hell yeah. Woohoo! Look at that baby go.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket.
Max Q.
SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops in Mission Control. The 4 core stage engines are throttling down ahead of passing through max Q.
That's those RS-25 crackle. The crackle of those engines is, it's beautiful to see in person if you've never had the opportunity.
Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour. The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis 1. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour.
Beautiful.
Standing
cone.
by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter.
And separation. Good sep.
Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange.
Now those will burn
2
up
minutes and 36 seconds
land in
into
the
the
ocean.
flight. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston. We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated. And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well. For future crew members,
I don't know what's going on with their audio, so I'm going to cut off from it.
we just heard the call for 3-engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended the first flight of Artemis at 5,200 miles per hour, 148 miles downrange.
So now it will go to an animation of the things from here on out.
We're 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. So far, we've had a clean ascent. We saw those solid rocket boosters jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds after liftoff. Shortly after, we had the service module panels fairings separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system was inert for this flight, except to perform this separation. Those 4 core stage engines will continue to fire and power the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange. Booster flight controller reports that the engines are looking good. Our core stage main engine cutoff time is about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. We are now 5 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 7,656 miles per hour. Again, 4 good core stage engines, those 4 RS-25 engines.
Once we start the liftoff.
The last time those core stage engines flew, they were taking space shuttles to orbit, and now with upgraded capabilities, they're launching the future of human spaceflight. 1,656 miles per hour. 5 minutes, 42 seconds into the mission. We are now traveling 8,800 miles per hour, 345 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. Again, we are anticipating core stage main engine cutoff at about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And about 10 seconds later, we'll see core stage separation, at which point Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will be flying free. Now traveling over 10,000 miles per hour, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1, 427 miles downrange. Quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams continue to monitor this first flight. About a minute and a half now until that core stage main engine cutoff time. Our 4 core stage engines continue to fire at maximum thrust. Quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams continue to monitor this first flight. Coming up on 7 minutes since launch today, now traveling over 12,800 miles per hour, 563 miles downrange. Again, still quiet here in Mission Control Houston. As we prepare for main engine cutoff, the 4 RS-25 engines are beginning to throttle down. "30 seconds now until core stage main engine cutoff. All 4 engines continue to throttle down. Now 7 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight, traveling over 16,000 miles per hour. Continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control, Houston. We're standing by for core stage main engine cutoff. And we have confirmation of core stage main engine cutoff. Orion is now in Earth's orbit. The flight dynamics officer reports that we have a nominal main engine cutoff. And we just heard the call for core stage separation. That means Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage are now flying free from the core stage of the Space Launch System. The next milestone will be solar array deploy approximately 18 minutes after liftoff. But before Orion stretches its wings, let's check back in with our friends at Kennedy Space Center and hear all about what it was like to hear the rocket roar off the launch pad. Megan and Kayla, I've got to hear all about it.
Well, if you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we just watched Artemis 1 launch, our first step towards our next adventure into deep space. As Leah said, I'm NASA's Megan Cruz, and this is NASA astronaut Kayla Barron. And I'm kind of still giddy and speechless. I don't even know how to explain how I'm feeling right now.
I feel the same way.
Okay, we don't want to listen to them talk anymore. But we'll still watch in case something exciting comes up. Really good news for the team. Really good news for Artemis. Really excited to see it. I didn't think it was likely to happen based on what I was hearing from inside. And then they had the same issue that they've had in other tests and other things that they've had happen. So it was really good to see, really exciting to see. Great flight. Everything looks incredibly well done. Very nominal flight. I'm really excited, as you can see when it lifted off. If you have never taken in a rocket launch in person, put it on your bucket list, make it happen, do it sometime. It's totally worth it. They're really cool. and one thing is that it's really cool to see it on video and it sounds awesome, but to see it in person is a totally different experience. Germs, thanks for joining me. Want to do space fun? Like 2 years ago, we actually went to White Sands for the first time, and it's really cool. Yes, and we went to the Titan Missile Museum. We also went to New Mexico with Virgin Orbit. That's out in that direction as well. And all of it's really cool. I've been to Kennedy several times. There's actually a launch company in Michigan. So rockets are my bread and butter, and I absolutely love them. So I think it's really cool to see one in person. If you're out in California, or I don't know where you are, just assume California, Vandenberg Air Force Base hosts SpaceX launches, and those would be really cool to see as well. So yeah, I think it's so cool to see them. They're incredibly complex machines that have a lot of things that could go wrong, and only one way to do it right. So I'm really excited to see that they were successful. You're in Arizona. Okay. So unfortunately, there's nothing out your way. There's New Mexico. It's called Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. That's where Virgin but but they're not actually they're doing a different way of launching. So they're actually putting a rocket on an aircraft and launching it out there. So, and it's in the middle of nowhere. It was, it was such a long drive to get to it, but really cool to see. Oh, California. Oh, sorry. Other one. Because SpaceX is in Hawthorne, and that is Vandenberg. And something cool with Vandenberg is they have cloud cover a lot of the times, and the launches look like they're punching through the clouds, and it's really neat to see. So okay, that one, cool. So yeah, SpaceX launches out of there. They launch a lot of the National Reconnaissance Office missions out in that direction. So really cool ones that are secret government technology that they're putting up to spy on us. But so but yeah, really cool. Of course, the best place to see a launch is Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Like I said, I've been there a bunch of times. Really cool. And NASA exceptionally dials that up because that's where all the tourists go. So Kennedy Space Center is always worth. There's also, I don't know how far you are to Brownsville, Texas, but Brownsville has the Starbase Texas, where they are doing the test launches for the Starship program. So that one's a one that, yeah, they're so excited. I know the lead engineer that works on the engine program for Artemis, and that's where they were having all the pressurization problems, was with the engines and not having a bleed for the pressurization. So I know that they were really unsure of the launch even tonight. When I spoke to them before the day tonight, they were not looking forward to it. And then there was the engine test hold, and I thought they were going to scrub again, but I'm happy that they made it through. We can actually listen to this for a second.
What a beautiful view it is. So congratulations. So we got a couple of traditions here in launch control. And the first one is when you're in the position for the first time, you get a tie cutting. And so I have my launch director scissors. And I'm going to get my tie cut by a couple of legends that are here. And then anyone who wants their tie cut will be making the rounds in the firing room. You got your console chiefs. If they want to do it, that's fine. If you want me to do it, you might have to wait a little while, but I'll stay all night if I have to. It'll be my pleasure to cut ties.
Yeah, they're
So I'm
excited.
going to take care of mine, and then I have one other presentation that I want to make this evening.
So NASA's a cool agency with a lot of really cool people that have done some amazing things. I think that they're their own worst enemy sometimes because they get in their own way with the it has to be a legacy program, so it has to be legacy tech. But that's one of the things that I wish that they would take advantage of, and maybe the next generation will kind of move in that direction. Of a lot of people that worked on the Apollo program and are
This
very
is
set
Charlie
in their
Blackwell
ways.
Thompson, Artemis 1 launch
So,
director. She just got her
hopefully a new
tie cut.
infusion
That is
of
a tradition here at NASA.
talent
We
can
just got to
bring that.
hear her talk to the team, and one thing that really stuck out to me that
And I
she said
agree,
is that they really
tradition's
earned their
super
place in
important.
history. We're coming up on Solar Array Deploy. Let's go on to
and they
Leah.
are a program that's done some pretty incredible things. So.
Thanks, Megan. And yes, we're here in Mission Control Houston, still monitoring the Artemis 1 mission and the first flight of Orion atop the Space Launch System. So far, we saw successful liftoff at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time, all the way through separation from the core stage. We now have Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage flying free. And we've just heard that we have initiated solar array deploy. So we are turning our focus to that. The spacecraft was running on battery power, but stretching these wings will allow it to stop relying on those batteries and significantly extend the time it can stay in space. So solar array deploy takes about 12 minutes. We have 4 solar arrays that we need to deploy and latch. These will provide power to the spacecraft on its journey to distant retrograde orbit and all the way back to Earth. Once these are properly configured, again, Orion will no longer need to rely solely on battery power. And we expect this to be done about 30 minutes after liftoff. Right now, we're 19 minutes since liftoff today. Orion is now traveling 17,175 miles per hour. We're continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston from the flight controllers monitoring the mission.
Okay, so it's flying around the globe at 17,000 miles an hour. It will make its pass, it will use gravity assist from the Earth, and then it will throw itself out and around the moon in kind of a figure 8 style. From that figure 8, it will orbit the moon a couple times, hit the brakes really fast. The brakes on a spacecraft is the engine in retrograde. It will actually turn itself around, orbit the moon, and then this mission will actually just return back to the Earth shortly thereafter. That's a really cool video of the solar deployment. But yeah, so 26 days, and then it will come back to Earth and splash down and hopefully have a lot of data that engineers can study and get us all ready for Artemis 2, which will be in 2025, and it will be the first manned mission of Artemis and the first return to the moon since the 1960s. So it's been quite a while since we've been there. I don't know how much of the program that you keep up with, but the difference this time is we're trying to build a base that we can stay at instead of go there, grab some rocks, return home. So that's the hope, is we can stay out there for a long time and make a permanent civilization and make it a gateway to Mars and future exploration. So this is the first step in humans living off Earth for extended periods of time for the first time ever. So it's a really helpful and really cool thing that we're doing here. Super excited about it still. And yeah, sorry, I'm just listening to make sure they're not saying anything important. So those are some really cool views of, you know, the back of the panels and its journey through space. So gotcha. So Germs, I don't know if you know much about me, but I'm a former federal law enforcement officer, so I have tons of clearances. tons. And served in the military right out of high school, the U.S. Air Force. So I'm already in this system, and if I had it all to do again, I wouldn't have. But I'm already there, so I'm not as worried about it. But yeah, it was appealing right out of school, serve my country, rah rah rah, you know. But yeah, so I actually did some HLS work for NASA, and some different things in tandem with them, and it is not a place where I would want to work ever. I'll never go back to government work. I'll do my own thing. So. But yeah, so I think this is really cool, and I would happily jump on the next spacecraft and go to the moon or Mars at any point, though. Without hesitation. I would have jumped on this one if they would have let me. But, oh, I guess I can turn they're talking back and forth, so I'll turn this back on. And I say that and now nothing. So I'm in
Coming up in a
Southeast
little less than
Michigan,
30 minutes is the
actually,
perigee raise
and,
maneuver.
They're targeting December 1st for the Starship at Starbase, Texas. And I'm hoping to go down there. I haven't quite figured out how to stream yet from on location like that. But if I do, I'll stream my own video. If not, I'll steal somebody else's again. But yeah, I've actually been to Starbase a couple times. Really cool facility. I may actually show that. I did a video of a tour that I kind of gave myself of Starbase, Texas, and I might share that tomorrow during my regular streaming time. So. Okay.
And with our launch at
Grand Rapids is
1:41 Eastern Time this morning, we are looking for a perigee raise maneuver about 53 minutes into today's flight. Again, we are now 25 minutes and 47 seconds into the flight, and we have a complete deployment of all 4 solar arrays. Orion's journey to the moon continues as planned. Again, looking forward to that perigee raise maneuver. That'll be coming up again at about 53 minutes into the mission, so about 27 minutes from now. During the perigee raise maneuver, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will use its RL-10 engine to lift the lowest point of Orion in Earth's orbit. The current orbit is more of an oval shape than a perfect circle, and this burn will raise that point closest to Earth and make the orbit more circular. This will also include a checkout of Orion's systems and any adjustments to the solar arrays. It'll be a short burn, less than 30 seconds long, but critical to keep us on track, and it also prepares us for the next engine burn to send Orion to the moon. That's the translunar injection burn. That'll come up a little later, which is a longer burn, another firing of the RL-10 engine on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage.
So what that means is perigee is the lowest point in orbit, apogee is the highest, and then on the opposite side, so the almost the quarter marks of the circle, that's where you do your prograde burns to raise that orbit or lower that orbit with a retrograde burn. And that's how you get more of a eccentric orbit or more of a circular orbit, and then they'll also use that to raise the orbit for the lunar injection. So that's what they were talking about there. But yeah, back to my original thought. Tomorrow on my normal stream, I'll probably do that Starbase Texas self-tour and kind of narrate it and point it out. When I actually took that video, I went in 2020, I believe. And 2020, they hadn't put up security or any kind of walls or fences or anything like that. For the most part, it was still fairly new, so I was able to get some pretty good access. And I've been since, and you can't get nearly as close. So, kind of a really cool tour, and I'll probably do that at my normal stream. So, perfect. Okay, I explained it well enough. So yeah, that's because, well, if you know physics, when you go down, you speed up. When you go up, you slow down. So that's kind of, I wasn't technically trespassing. They just technically hadn't established themselves yet. So if you get a chance, I stream at 12:30 Monday, or sorry, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 12:30 tomorrow, if I can talk, Eastern time, 12:30 tomorrow. I'll definitely do the Starbase tour. And they had security at like the test site, at like the test facility. But other than that, you can get, there was no sign. So, there was a very specific part that was cut off very, very much so. And I actually got yelled at for going on the other side. But, you know, if you're not pushing it, you're not having fun. So, but yeah, for the most part, you can get into a lot of different things down there, or could at the time. So, but yeah, I can show that tomorrow for sure. And that was back in the early days of Starbase. Trying to see if they're saying anything. So they're showing where they want to land and where they want to do exploration for this particular set of missions. And that's at the South Pole. They want to reach the South Pole because they believe that there's lunar ice, and, well, I'm pretty sure they know there's lunar ice because of the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter that's been collecting data. But they want to classify the water and the water ice to see what's underneath of it and what's usable. Yeah, I know that was horrific because I said 17 different things. 12:30 Eastern time is what time tomorrow. So 12:30 Eastern. Yeah. Yep, for streaming tomorrow. Yep. So what is that, like 10:30 Arizona or 9:30 Arizona? One of those two. So they're talking about, this is interesting. Yeah, no problem.
Back out here.
And the three of you guys really, I would say, saved the day today. I mean, really, you guys had to go in there to what's called the blast danger zone. You guys are specially trained to be able to do operations on the pad while cryo is loading. Talk to us about getting that call, being told, hey, you guys need to go in there, and it was the first time for all three of you.
Yeah, all I could say is we were very excited. I was ready to get up there and go.
Really? How are you guys feeling?
I was very comfortable, very confident in the test team and the procedures and our training. We did a great job.
Walk us. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So how gratifying it must be for you guys, because you train for this eventuality but don't always get to do it. Billy was saying that he's been a Red Crew team member for 37 years, and this is the first time he's been called to go into the blast danger zone. So I know for us, when we're training for all of these eventualities, whether it's a spacewalk or robotics operations, you really want to put that training into practice. How do you guys feel like it went today?
Amazing. I still can't believe it. It's surreal to me.
That's something I
insane.
Yeah, kind of walk us through what you were thinking. So you get there, and what is it? Just like game time, and you're really focused, or how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'd say we were very focused on what was happening up there, just making sure we knew what was happening. Because the rocket's, it's alive, it's creaking, it's making venting noises. It's pretty scary. So on zero deck, my heart was pumping, my nerves were going, but. Yeah, we showed up today. I think as soon as we walked up those stairs, we were ready to rock and roll.
And they were telling us a bit about it while you were working on it. You guys were actually just torquing down the valve to prevent or reduce the leak rate or stop the leak. Is that right?
That's right. Just the packing gland. It was a little loose, so went up there and tightened her up.
You're probably still like in this, oh my gosh moment, like all of us are. Has it actually hit you, like the role you played today in making Artemis 1 launch?
I still can't believe it. It's like I said, it's surreal and just amazing. I don't know about you guys, but
they're nodding along behind you for sure. Anything you want to say to the launch team? Again, this is a big day for the launch.
Okay, so what they're talking about there is that is the crew, that some gutsy people right there. They went out to the pad to tighten a valve on a hydrogen leak, and hydrogen is very flammable and very explosive, and that's crazy. I wouldn't go out to a rocket that was full of fuel and leaking and go try and fix it, because sorry, that was terrible. I don't know if you heard that, but had a mic issue. So anyways, yeah, huge danger, and you're out there, and the smallest spark could, it'd be like trying to tighten bolts in a propane-filled room. It's just not something I would do, but but yeah, really good on them. And like I said, that was the problem for the first 3 scrubs, is that specific valve. So to know that they got that fixed, awesome to them, and I appreciate their work. So I think at this point, because I'm an old guy and I have to be up for work, and it's 2:30 here, so I think I'm gonna sign off for the evening here. And like I said, 12:30 Eastern, I will be streaming, and I will put up the Starbase tour, share some photos, stuff like that. NASA will be covering this for the next 26 days, so if you ever want to check in and you're bored, go to the NASA YouTube or I'll probably be talking about it at some point. You could come join us. And in 26 days, I'll definitely, half past midnight. Okay, so you're 2 hours behind me then. So, but yeah, thank you so much for joining me. It's much more fun having somebody to bounce back and forth. So, and if you can't catch me for whatever reason, it should be on the YouTube page. Hopefully. YouTube is finicky, is what I've learned so far. So awesome. Thank you so much for joining, and hope to see you again. And for anybody else watches, thank you so much, and have a good evening.